And welcome to Global Village. This is the program that brings you the most contentious topics facing our society today. In today's program, we'll be talking about immigration. Why do people come to the UK? We will be engaging in a discussion about feminism and find out if it's still relevant today. And lastly, we'll be talking about the pay cuts for university lecturers. How does this affect the quality of education? Jobs, security, welfare, education. These are just a few of the reasons why people from all over the world come to the UK. Joining us today are Jenny Boateng, Sarah El Baradei, and Blessing Mapula. Welcome to our show.
Thank you.
I'd like to start with Blessing. What circumstances brought you to the...
When I was growing up, when I was primary school years, we were in areas where there were a lot of other Ghanaians, a lot of West Africans. So when I was in primary school, I didn't notice any cultural differences. So we had the same shops, so we can buy all the same food. How they were, who were really, their heritage was from England, how different they were to someone like me, who I was the first generation Briton. So I would say from 11 plus, and I went to Cambridge as well. So from 11 plus upwards, then I noticed the cultural differences and really interacting with people who were really brought up under, in the English culture, the English background, the English history. That's when I really started to notice it, when I started moving out of Peckham. So, yeah.
And have any of you ever experienced any discrimination? I think you, Sarah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's still there, but it's kind of subtle, kind of. I've seen a few instances at work where you get overlooked when it comes to some opportunities, because maybe they don't think, since you weren't born in the UK, maybe you can't do things just as well as people who are born and brought up here can. So yeah, it's there, but a little bit of it, it's kind of subtle, but it's not very open, people discriminating. No.
Jenny, would you?
I would say from my own experiences, a lot of where I've been and my experience have been based on merit, how good you are. So the school that I even went to, you have to take exams to get in, and then Cambridge is about what you can do. And I would say, so on that level, if you are good enough to do everything else, there isn't really discrimination, but I think it's very subtle in a sense. People think that they know your culture by looking at you. So people may make jokes like, oh, in it, man, or say something like that, and I'll be like, I don't speak like that, but they would assume by looking at you, but they're not necessarily trying to be hostile, but they make assumptions on how you would probably behave and how you would respond to situations because of maybe your background and where you're from. And then on the flip side, I'd say, so that's probably more in institutions where people are supposed to be more educated, but then at the same time, you do, I know my sister, she works in a very big multinational organization, and I remember her boss was talking to her about the Olympics and said, oh, my son asked me a question, does running fast make you black, his little son? And he thought it was like a joke, like, oh, they asked me this funny question, but for us, my sister was a bit taken aback by that comment. So I think they're very subtle, and they think that they can make assumptions on culture, but they're not being discriminatory. So yeah, I would say those are kind of the mixes, the dynamics of discrimination.
So what would you guys say to someone who is against immigration? What would you respond to someone who is standing in front of you and saying that immigration is wrong and that people should go back? And
well, to be honest, immigration is people have to have access and go in and out, and it's still until today we do see a lot of people from the UK, they want to travel outside, overseas, probably to the New Zealand or any other countries to settle down in order to live with this living standard, a better living standard. So immigration is still on. It doesn't matter if you come from rich countries or poor countries, but yeah, I just feel that it should be okay.
I think probably the key thing is to ask why they have the view that they have, and I think there are a lot of arguments of which some are valid and maybe some are not so valid. So in terms of the land space, how much space do we have to accommodate people going in and out, versus things like putting pressure on public services versus what people are bringing from outside, so what qualities they bring, what kind of capital are they bringing, both intellectually, cash, in terms of cash. So I think the argument depends on why you have that view, and looking at the flows, and people do come in, but yet some people go out, and what value is added to those that come in to make England what it is. And I think that's what you need to ask when you're engaging in these types of conversations. Why do you hold the view that you do? And then from there, have you assessed the benefits that we have from people coming in?
Yeah, I think these questions surrounding immigration and these tend to always come up in the times of austerity, and has it historically been so. So I think there's sort of a wash over, like a right-wing sort of sentiment that is washing over all of Europe, not just in the UK, but in Sweden as well, in Holland and in Belgium. So yes, you're totally right in that. So just to play with the idea, what would you imagine the UK being without immigration, being a totally homogeneous society?
Personally, I don't think it's. I think it's possible to reduce like the number of people coming into a country, especially like this one, because it's an island as well. But I don't think it's possible to actually do away with immigration altogether, because you realize that wherever you go, any country that you go, there's a lot of expatriates from the United Kingdom as well, working in other countries as well, who like study there as well, you know, teach and stuff like that. So to actually say, okay, we're gonna put a stop to immigration like totally, I don't think it's possible, because there's like skills, you know, that are out there from like people from other countries that they actually bring to the UK. I think like Jenny says, I think it depends on where you actually view it from. Some people are against immigration because of all the stories that they see in the papers, in the media, about, you know, how criminals they commit serious crimes, and then, you know, the government has a big problem trying to kick them out. So I think, you know, it actually depends on what, like, from where you're looking at it from.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, I would like to thank you all for coming and sharing your stories and experiences with us. Thank you. And let's hear from the public opinion.
I've worked here since August 2009.
My parents came over from Ghana when they're about in their mid-20s.
And I've been here for nearly 5 years now.
To pursue my studies.
We were refugees from Ghana.
Hopefully find work in the UK.
What I do mostly is dispatch. I work mostly in the warehouse.
I thank God I was able to go to Cambridge and get a first-class degree.
Proud to be a Londoner.
So, this year's International Women's Day saw a particular focus on violence against women. According to recent reports published by the European Union's Agency for Fundamental Rights, 1 out of 3 women have faced violence or sexual abuse since the age of 15, and 8% suffer from an abuse since the last 12 months. Even 2 weeks ago, thousands of people took to the streets supporting the International Women's Day. Okay, go, 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 go.
It's a new day. The 8th of March marks the International Women's Day. Millions of people poured into the streets around the world to show their support and make their voices heard.
Thank you again.
During the last 100 years, there have been 3 distinctive waves of feminist struggle, which has resulted in the right to vote for women, criminalization of marital rape, closing the pay gap between men and women, and challenging the stereotypes of women that we often see in the media today. Is feminism still relevant today? Aren't men and women equal in society?
More than ever, with stories that have unfolded over the last week, both in our personal circles and in media coverage of violence, including the Pistorius trial, we are present to the everydayness of violence against women and girls, and how it is made to be both insignificant and profitable. In our work to challenge racism and sexism in the media, we see more and more the use of violence against women and girls as a form of entertainment.
But also, through our work at IMCON, we're present to how violence against women of colour and women of particular religions is seen in this country as more barbaric, backwards and uncivilised. We see people treating violence against women and girls as if it is something over there, and that what is happening over there is somehow more horrific and disconnected from what is happening right here.
Because if 1 in 4 women experience violence, that's a quarter of the people here right now who have needed or will need support.
You know what I mean. Freedom is mine, and I know how I feel. It's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life for me.
For some women, the hardest thing to do right now is to wake up every morning, and so we acknowledge you for that. For others, it's having the courage to be here today, and we thank you for that. And for all the women who have paved the way and who continue to pave the way for all of us, for believing that we can make a difference, for not giving up, and for inspiring us to continue, we thank you.
So, is feminism still relevant today? Joining us today is Jelani Romani, Kingston University economics student, and Professor Peter Buse, head of the School of Performance and Screen Studies. Jelani, have you heard that Kingston University recently had a campaign banning the Sun magazine from university campuses because of the page 3? I'd like to ask you, what do you think about taking such an active stance in this regard?
I have heard about it. I'm not very familiar with what exactly was going on, but I know it was about the 3rd page on the Sun, and I totally agree with it. It's more like it's becoming more like a pornographic newspaper or magazine, would say, and the Sun is one of the most read newspaper in the UK. And when you sit in a coffee shop or in a public place or even at home on the living area and you have kids running around and you're stuck on that page, I just don't think it's very sociable or very acceptable in today's sociable life.
Dr. Peter Bruce, can you tell us why you think feminism is relevant today, or is it relevant today?
Okay, I should say that I was asked not that long ago to take part in this, so I didn't prepare much, and I think it is not necessarily right that you ask a man that question, and I think maybe there's a different question, which is, if you're a woman today, why are you not a feminist? Rather than, is feminism still relevant today? I think it's extremely relevant today, absolutely.
So if I would rephrase the question, is feminism something important for both genders more? Because historically, feminism has always been something that has been attached to the female gender, seeing it that they are the ones that have been striving harder in this struggle.
It has to be relevant for both genders, because what feminism is trying to do is change the relationship between the sexes, and presumably change men in particular, but men have fewer reasons to be feminists than women do, because feminism is the struggle for women's rights and women in general, and so often men stand something to lose if they take feminism seriously, which ideally they should. So I think it's harder to convince men to be feminists, because there's not as much at stake for them in terms of...
Well, would you like to respond to
I
that?
just wanted to respond a bit to that. I'm not sure if I misunderstood you, but I think it should be equally, because the way I understood what you said is that the man is like you've got more responsibilities, or the way you came across, it sounded that way?
No.
It's probably just me.
No. I think what he said is that men have more to lose in a patriarchal society than a society
okay.
that
Yeah, sorry, I didn't explain myself very well. Yeah, it wasn't that at all. I think that, it's harder for men to change their assumptions because they're profiting from the world the way it's arranged. And feminism wants to change the world and should want to change the world, and men should want to change the world.
Yeah,
but they're profiting from this. Obviously not. But strangely enough, they still do, because they're gaining from it and profiting from it.
So
from a non-feminist world.
Of course.
So if I say, we were talking about page 3, we were talking about the portrayals of women, seeing that they are very sexualized, hyper-sexualized actually in the media. Many scholars have argued that there's a link between how women are portrayed in the media and how they are treated in society. Dr. Peter Bruce, would you like to respond to that?
I think it's an incredibly difficult question to know what is the relationship between that portrayal in media and the real existing relationships between men and women. You're working in media studies yourself, I understand, so one of the things you study is the way that media is changing rapidly, right? So we're into a world where it's not, the images aren't just being generated by the Sun and by large organizations, television companies. The images and the words are being generated by individuals. So we have a whole new layer, don't we, in Web 2.0 of people generating Twitter, they're generating Facebook comments, often which are quite insulting, and then are taken up by the large organizations, television stations, and so on. So what do we make, for example, of the controversy about the, what is it, the £20 note, the £10 note, Jane Austen. And what happened as a result of that? There was a woman called Caroline Criado Perez, right, who was advocating nothing particularly outrageous, that Jane Austen should be put on this note. And she received an absolute torrent of abuse, didn't she? And there's other examples like this as well. The classical scholar Mary Beard makes a deliberate effort to speak out in public as often as possible, and then she gets torrents of abuse from people who can be anonymous, but whose words are read and seen by many, many people. So I don't know, I didn't answer the question about what's the relationship between those portrayals of women and the effect on the way women are treated, but we're seeing a whole new level of what is effectively women being shut down in the public sphere, attacked, often anonymously, but by huge numbers of people. And I think that is a critical and key issue at the moment, if we're talking about media and feminism.
Okay, on that note, I would like to thank you both for coming here, Dr. Peter Bruce and Jelani Romani. Now it's time for our last topic of the day. Kingston University staff has been going out on a strike 3 times this year, demanding a reinstating of their original salaries after they were hit by pay cuts. Since 2008, the average wages have been decreasing by 16% for faculty members, and with the rise of living costs, many lecturers finding it very hard to make ends meet.
No way! No pay! No way! What do we want? More! What do we want? More! What do we want? More! When do we want it? Now! When do we want it?
The management will say that, oh well, staff will get incremental rises, and that would mean a rise of about 4% in pay, but the point they leave out is that that only applies to staff who are actually going through the pay scale system. Most teaching staff at Kingston are actually on what's called grade 9, which according to management is the main career grade. And but once you get up to the top of grade 9, which if you'd started as a young lecturer with a newly minted PhD, you would be reaching by your late 30s, early 40s. Once you get to the top of grade 9, you don't get any more increments, you just get the cost of living increase. So actually, a significant proportion of staff, at a time when their cost of living is a particularly sensitive issue because they'll have young children of their own to raise, are actually having their real wages cut.
My name is Amanda, and I'm an HPL in Politics and International Relations. I teach Latin American politics here at Kingston. I'm here on the second of 3 rolling 2-hour strikes that have been called by the National UCU to try and force the government to come back to the table on the issue of a wage increase, specifically to keep up with the cost of living increases. We've seen a reduction in our wages, real wages, of about 13% since 2009, and a lot of our members can't keep up.
Welcome back. To discuss this issue, we are joined by Nilofer Erdem, a 3rd-year politics and international relations student. Also joining us is Dr. Dave Tinham, who is an hourly paid lecturer at Kingston University and a UCU officer and teaches politics and human rights. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to start with you, Dr. Dave. Since 2009, there has been a decrease in salaries for teaching staff by 16%. Can you tell us why we're seeing these pay cuts?
Okay, well, I think going back a few years, what we were hearing a lot of was this logic of austerity. Everybody from our VCs to our politicians were telling us there's no more money, we need to tighten our belts. However, it's become increasingly apparent recently, and especially since students were started being charged up to £9,000, that there is in fact plenty of surplus value within the universities, and it's now just a question of what VCs want to spend that money on. So the money that you as students are paying, it's going somewhere, but it's not necessarily going to the lecturers that teach you. And as you say, that in real terms, over the last 5 years we've seen a pay drop of between 15 and 16% in the university.
And the university was actually offered a 1% pay rise, which the UCU rejected as an insult.
That's correct. I mean, in lieu of this 15 to 16% real term drop, we saw this as an insulting pay rise, of an offer of 1%. And as you know, we've been out on strike, we've had full-day strikes, 2-hour rolling strikes, we've been working to contract. Still, The representatives of UKIA, who's the national pay negotiating body, don't want to come back to the table. It's even got to the stage now where we're actually going into negotiation for next year's pay rises without even getting this sorted.
And this doesn't even count for the unpaid extra hours that university lecturer staff or teaching staff overall, which have the highest unpaid extra hours, which is 12.5%, 12.5 hours a week.
Of course, yeah. I'm really glad you mentioned that, because it's not just about the take-home pay, it's about working conditions as well, which is really important. We've found that we've been doing our own surveys here at Kingston, but this kind of bears out what's happening in wider society and universities, is that we've heard of the lecturers here crying at their desks, the stress that because of the workload that they're being asked to carry out, and as we've seen, less and less money.
So Nilfa, I'd like to turn to you. You're a student here at Kingston University. Can you tell us how the strike has affected you, and also what do you think about your lecturers having their salaries decreased?
I'm like behind the strikes 100%. I think they're a really useful way of basically protesting the recent attacks on higher education, the creating a market out of higher education. It's part and like the decrease in pay is part and parcel with a broader initiative by government to basically turn universities into enterprises, into businesses, whereby money is meant to be saved by attacking the working conditions of lecturers. And I mean, this also affects students as well. I mean, we're having our lecturers overworked, underpaid. There's also little guarantee that they will be with us for a long period, since the rise in like 0-hour contracts. But yeah, so I think that the strikes are extremely positive, particularly since the removal of the block grant to universities, meaning that students have to pay triple what they're supposed to, or they had been rather. I don't think that they should be paying anything at all.
Yeah, so you were touching upon the issues of privatization of higher education, and that money is actually not being allocated to the teachers or the services that the university provides, rather it's being put on sort of on top of each other. Another thing I would like to get your opinion on is that recent figures have shown that there's a huge pay gap between genders. Female lecturers make on average 13% less in pay. What do you think about that, and how do you respond to it?
Is that me? Yeah, I mean, I think it really exposes the discriminatory nature of like this kind of market capitalism. Like it's this kind of rationale amongst employers that makes them see women as less desirable as employees in comparison to men, on the basis that, for instance, they may have to drop out for childcare, or they may decide to give birth at some point in their lives. I think that we really need to, we need to kind of reframe the situation in a way that, we need to remove this rationale of like making money out of people. So like, yeah, I think more collective action is necessary to combat this.
But this is also something that the UCU have been campaigning about and has been part of the negotiating issue. And we cannot understand why in 2014 we're still talking about these differential pay gaps just purely based upon gender over people doing comparable jobs. You would think that the university should be in the vanguard of progressive social change, but it seems like we're continuously dragging our heels. Gender is an issue, but it's not just gender, it's also about diversity within the workplace. I mean, I just need to look around this studio to see that we're really proud that Kingston students are a really diverse bunch, but we don't see that in terms of the lecturers that teach us so much. It's also in terms of class, because of the over-reification of the PhD. So we're getting a very narrow kind of band of people coming in and becoming lecturers, and really what we think we'd all benefit from would be a more diverse set of backgrounds and opinions.
So what do you think the future holds in terms of stopping the pay cuts, decreasing the pay gaps between the genders, and also sort of getting a more diverse faculty staff in universities, not only here in Kingston but also in other parts of the UK? What is the next stage in this sort of struggle?
Well, I see it on two levels. I mean, firstly, as we've mentioned, the UCU are back in the negotiating tables at the moment, and they're talking about these very issues. We do have a final card to play up our sleeve that I hope doesn't come to fruition, and that is the possibility of the marking boycott, which, if we still don't have any meaningful negotiating going on by April the 28th, we may be forced to consider withholding student grades. Now obviously that's the last thing that we want to do, because we're here as a vocation, we're here for students, but nevertheless, if they won't come back to the negotiating table, we will consider doing it. The other level that I think this might work on, and Nilofer might be able to talk more about this, is that I think the student movement has been particularly impressive around about the period of the implementation of fees, around about 2010, and was extremely strong. But I think, like in all movements, these things come in waves. But I think the student movement is going to be coming back.
All right, thank you all for coming today. That's all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank all our guests for coming and all our viewers. I hope you've enjoyed the program. This is Global Village, where we bring you the most contentious issues of today. I'm your host, Ansa Bakir. Thank you for watching.